Hi, and thank you for joining me. My name is Rob Scott, publisher at UC Today, and I'm really excited to present this year's UC Trends series. If you're a fan of UC Today, then you'll know that every October we run a special video series called UC Trends. In this insightful video series, I talk to senior executives from trailblazing vendors in UC, collaboration and CX, and discuss their perspective of the marketplace and what they predict will be the next year's game changers. We will also have some fun with them at the end of the main interview session with some quick fire questions to reveal a bit more about their personality and what makes them tick. Stand by for UC Trends 2021. The world of security and compliance has been at the center of most conversations this year, so who better to speak to about security than the winner of Best Security Product of the Year 2020, Theta Lake. Their AI-powered compliance and risk management suite provides deep supervision and detection features for leading UCaaS platforms, allowing organizations to align their safety, cybersecurity, privacy and compliance requirements while empowering their workforce to collaborate remotely. I'm delighted to welcome to the virtual studio Theta Lake's co-founder and CEO, Devin Redmond. Hi Devin, thanks for joining me for UC Trends 2021. Really good to see you again, and excited to kind of hear more about you, your year at Theta Lake, and where you think the industry is going forward. So how about we start with a bit of intro, bit of background on yourself. How did you get into this kind of technology from the start, and tell us more.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Devin. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Theta Lake. I've actually been in the security and compliance space now north of 20 years, longer than I actually care to give the exact number for. Most of the thesis of technologies I've built or helped build and contributed to over that career have been around following the flow of the communication stack. So as people create and change the way they share information using the internet, there is a thesis that I have long had, which is there's a necessary requirement for security and compliance to follow that. Where your data goes, where your users go, is usually where the mistakes happen, where bad things can happen, even by accident, but sometimes by intent. And the reality is there needs to be security and compliance technology that follows that. And so that's something that I learned early in my career and then have followed that pattern over time. And over the last 10 years of my career, really felt passionate about trying to follow the leading edge of those trends. So as people start sharing information and communicating in new ways and doing it in a more robust way, really thinking about what type of technology and what type of company could be built around that technology to solve that problem. And Theta Lake was really, the genesis was really around that, really thinking about as we use more and more tools like this or Zoom or Teams or WebEx, there's going to be a shift in how we share information because the features and capabilities inside of that, inside of the Slack, inside of any of those platforms is going to be so much more robust, right? You can share things on a camera, you can transfer things, you can use emojis to comment on somebody else's actual typed words. All of those things change the modes of how we're sharing information. And so Theta Lake was really designed to help solve some of those security and compliance challenges. And I think I'm a glutton for punishment. This is my second startup, being a co-founder and CEO in the last decade. And I love it. I love building a team. I love building new technology. I love trying to delight customers and having them respond the way I would hope they would respond when they see our technology and when they interact with our team.
Thank you. And Theta Lake goes from strength to strength. You've recently won Best Security Platform and Compliance Platform at UC Awards 2020. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great honor, and it was just a surprise to be a double winner. So it was terrific for us.
Yeah, really fantastic. And what I'm interested to know is what's the magic behind Theta Lake? How do you continue to be successful in today's marketplace?
So I think the marketplace has changed dramatically, and obviously you can talk about what I'm sure many of the interviews have talked about, which is the pandemic and COVID. But really, we had a vision going into this space, having learned a lot of lessons delivering uh, platforms designed for communication and security in our past. And so we had a very deliberate path that we wanted to take. First and foremost, by partnering with all of the leading vendors and having public facing integrations with them. Second, by taking what I would call a rich history in delivering machine learning based technologies from the early days. Our chief scientist, who I've worked with now across 3 companies, she actually was building DLP compliance algorithms back in 2006, right? In the early days before people talked about machine learning and before they talked about it as AI, and there were lots of conversations around explainability. She was on the cutting edge of those types of things. And that foundation and carrying that foundation through in terms of her understanding of compliance, her understanding of how to deliver algorithms, and then the ability to be a real scientist and use cutting edge techniques as they evolved, really gives us a big competitive edge, as does the fact that the core of our team has been focused on this type of problem and that same thesis now for more than a decade, almost 2 decades of bodies of work doing that. And so we understand all of the, I guess you call them table stakes, right? All of the baseline things that you need to have. And so we can really focus on what are the new things that we need to solve for? What are the new techniques we can use to solve for that? And that allows us to cover a lot of ground very quickly, right? We're not thinking about, hey, how do you build a role-based management system, or how should you deliver a policy engine? Because we built all those things before and we know how to do that. It's really focusing on the actual problem. What are we trying to solve for? Are we trying to detect somebody sharing a prospectus on screen, or somebody accidentally sharing a document that's got credit card numbers in it, or having a controversial image in the background, and really being able to focus on those, knowing that the rest of the platform is going to be enterprise ready, sound, and fully capable. And so that gives us a big head start. And I think it allowed us to adapt quickly when we saw the market accelerating this year. And the example I would use, and one of the reasons we were so proud of the security award, in addition to the compliance award, is we started with a big focus on compliance and thinking about data protection in the context of compliance. But as the pandemic came into effect, and as more and more people rushed to fuller adoption of the collaboration platforms, we started to see the implications around security and acceptable use. People sharing a link in a meeting, using the screen share in their browser and saying, hey, you should go to this link, or typing it in the chat, or having things in the background that can trigger liability for the organization. And so we had known that we were going to build those capabilities. We just assumed that that time horizon and the timeline for delivering them would be longer. But because we had that on our agenda and we kind of had the fundamentals, the understanding of what to do there, we were able to quickly say, okay, we need to accelerate this and put some of those things ahead of some of the other areas that we've been working on, maybe down in the weeds of compliance, if you will. So,
yeah. So what kind of conversations, I'm curious to kind of just hear kind of from you, what kind of conversations you were having with organizations, service providers, enterprises, during the pandemic, as we went through these initial, these stages. Initially, the kind of, the panic stage. Let's deploy something, and almost compliance and security kind of goes out the window. But
yeah.
How did that go for you?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting experiment, because I would say if you asked us in 2019 what our conversations were like, it was everybody acknowledging that they needed to do something for security and compliance in their collaboration suites, but not necessarily acknowledging how much of the mix of their communications were already there, right? Everybody has invested a lot in solutions for email DLP, email compliance, lots of levels of voice recording, and there's great technologies for those things. But there wasn't a lot of, I wouldn't say recognition, really acknowledgement that we were spending more and more of our time using collaboration platforms, whether you're using chat and you're sharing files and images on it, and that turns into a call, or that call turns into a video call, or whether you're straight using Zoom video conferencing, WebEx meetings, people weren't really acknowledging how much of the mix of their communications were there. And I think there was a lot of assumption that there was no way to solve that problem, that there was no way to be able to look inside of a video conference and not only capture the voice and be able to do things like transcription and analyze the transcript, or capture the files or the chat that may surround it, but actually capture what was showed or shared on screen, whether it was on camera or in the in-app whiteboarding or via a screen share of your desktop or of a web app in that environment. Everyone assumed, and sometimes we still find this assumption, that there's nothing you could actually do there to detect those things. And so that was kind of the state of 2019, where we would go in and we would get a lot of wows and, oh, I can't believe you could do that, in a good way. But it wasn't necessarily in people's budget or in their short-term roadmap because they just didn't have a plan there. As we got into 2020 and the pandemic started to set in, we saw a flurry of activity, lots of people coming to us and asking questions and trying to do discovery because they were realizing that their workplace, that was a physical workplace, was now a virtual workplace, and largely the workplace was actually the collaboration tools, right? It's not the room that I'm sitting in my home office. Everything that I do is inside of my computer, inside of those video conferencing platforms, which is all, not in anybody's corporate network. It's all inside of the platforms and tools they use. And as they were doing that, they realized that we better figure out if there's something we could do for security and compliance. And so we saw a huge spike in inbound, unsolicited, untargeted interest in what we were doing. That kind of leveled off as we got into April and May. And it was primarily because as we would talk to customers and even our partners, they were so slammed with trying to get all of the technology in place for their teams, right? So rolling out Zoom to tens of thousands of users in a large enterprise, rolling out Microsoft Teams, moving things from back office to deploying it more completely to users, expanding their use of Slack, sometimes using multiple tools all at the same time, which is pretty common in a large enterprise. And they were just swamped with that, right? You're inundated with trying to get that up and running and make it usable for users. And so we saw kind of a plateau. And then as we've gotten into the back half of the year and everybody's now fully ingrained in that new reality, they're realizing the risks that are happening in there, right? They're seeing their users make mistakes, do dumb things, not understand how to use the platform, share information too broadly, right? Not understanding that maybe if I have, I don't know, say an intake form or a customer list and I put it on a channel, it lives on that channel forever, and everybody who has access to the channel could have access to very sensitive information inside of that. Or maybe I have a lot of new usage of web apps for accounting, for HR, for customer contact databases or marketing, and I collaborate with my team and I open up my web browser and all of those things are open inside of my web browser, and I click through and I've got sensitive personnel information shared with everybody in there. Maybe I do it intentionally, which is inappropriate, or maybe it's an accident. And all of those use cases are coming to fruition for everybody. And so now we're in that second stage of, okay, now we really need to put something together. And you're starting to see a lot of other vendors trying to address some of those pieces of the problem. But the reality is the focus on delivering something that can really solve for this new environment is, happens to be our good fortune to be in place to be able to do that even in a difficult time out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that new environment is here to stay, right? So it might be it's not quite the workplace that we were used to, but it's certainly here to stay by the looks of things. Just thinking about Theta Lake, and you mentioned that you accelerated your roadmap this year. Could you talk us through kind of some of the innovations that your team were working with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always love talking about our baby, so happy to do that. So there were a couple examples I gave of some of the risks that have come into fruition for organizations that were things that we added this year. One of the really interesting ones that came from a customer, because they had seen this in their environment, was the sharing of web-based apps, right? So whether it's your intranet, whether it's an HR app, whether it's Salesforce or Zoho or HubSpot, or any number of payroll apps like Gusto and ADP, and you kind of name the spread of them. Not only detecting if something was shown on the screen, which we can do, and we can identify PII when it's in a screen share, but knowing that those apps were being shared is increasingly important. And even without a specific piece of PII, there can be very sensitive data about the organization that's unique to your organization that gets shared in that. So we created the ability across multiple categories or types of those applications. So HR applications, finance, customer contact databases, project systems, to be able to detect when you have an app that's being shared in your screen inside of that environment. So that's one of the types of examples of innovations that we added to help risk and compliance professionals detect when they may have sensitive data exposure, either by the specific data type or by the application that's being used in a collaboration session.
So it's kind of like you're always listening and you're always watching, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It comes back to the days of email systems where everybody has an expectation that there's something in place that's going to make sure that you don't get spam and bad things in, and that you don't send sensitive information out of the organization. And in a similar vein, thinking about what's happening inside of this workplace, just as you would if it was within your walls or within one of your other electronic communication systems, is really what we bring to the table on that front. And actually, as another example, one of the things that we did around our chat coverage is both the ability to detect when we see things like risky or compromised URLs or inappropriate URLs, but also detect when we see things on an asynchronous timeline. Somebody comes back and maybe you're thinking about a very focused compliance use case, and somebody puts a ticker symbol of a new stock that's out there, and you're in a financial services org. Not the worst thing in the world, but you may want to know when people share ticker symbols, because it's an indication that maybe they want to do a trade or they're promoting a stock, or you name it. But then somebody else comes back later and gives the thumbs up emoji on it, which can be actually perceived as an endorsement. You actually need to know that and understand the context. And so being able to identify that, all the way to being able to identify if somebody shared a risky URL or they shared a file, and within the file we'll detect if there's sensitive PII or other things in that. And then even downstream from that, will allow you to either automatically or have a risk or compliance, security or compliance professional remediate that directly in our system just by clicking remediate, or you can set a policy to automatically remove it. So that scenario where you have a sensitive piece of content or an offensive URL or you name it, living inside of a channel or living in a one-on-one chat in perpetuity between two people, you can remediate that and actually notify the users, to your point, always listening and watching, but notify the users that, hey, this was remediated by policy, and reminding them that this is a place of business, and we will monitor that place of business to make sure that bad things don't happen to you or to customers or other employees.
So my next question for you is kind of, I suppose, get the crystal ball question, the future. Interesting year for us all, in our work lives, our home lives. The pandemic is not over as we speak right now.
Yes.
Looking into 2021, what do you think is going to have the greatest impact on the industry? Do you think it's going to be much of the same, or do you think, the future of work is going to continue to change?
So I think there is going to be a ongoing change, an ongoing shift. I hope that we get through the pandemic and COVID-19 and are able to get to a little bit more balance, right? I feel like there's still a pendulum, and we've swung so far the other way, and we're all so remote from each other. I do think that, whether it's in California in the Valley, people aren't going to want to drive 2 hours to get to the office in traffic every day, and they're going to have realized that they're actually more effective on these tools than maybe some of the legacy tools that they've had, right? Email is not going to go away, and we'll all still have email, but we will probably use information sharing inside of collaboration much more than we had in the past, as we have been doing this year, but in a much more routine way, right? It'll just be part of the rhythm of how we work. Same thing for London, right? People aren't going to be spending 2 hours on the train 5 days a week going in and out of town both ways. They will probably want to do that once or twice, and we'll probably start to get into a rhythm of being very good about what we want to go in person for and spend time with our peers and our partners and our customers around. And then we will stabilize how we use a lot of these platforms to share information. I do think the next wave is going to be the follow-on functionality that gets embedded in these platforms for how you share information and use that sharing, right? So the collaboration whiteboarding will evolve pretty dramatically, I think, over the next year or two in terms of how you can implant information and share information directly in the whiteboard and use that as a source of collaboration. I also think that much more structure will be put around how you use your web-based apps and cloud-based infrastructure in conjunction with your collaboration environments. I think that will be another big area. And it was funny when we were talking about 2019, one of the things that we did right at the end of 2019 was a survey, in particular of financial services chief compliance officers. And in that survey, 68% of the respondents said that even a 10% increase in the use of collaboration tools would cause them to have to revamp their security and compliance controls. So just a 10% increase for 68% of them, right? The vast majority. And you kind of think about what that means in 2020 when it was much more than a 10% increase in the use of these tools. And the reconciliation of that in 2021 is going to be an ongoing scenario, right? And so that concept of tightening controls over your cloud-based apps, your web-based infrastructure, your collaboration platforms, and how you put safety in place in that new workplace is going to be the topic of follow-on in 2021. And I firmly believe, whether it's a crystal ball or sometimes having seen these stories play out and never having had a lightning rod event like a pandemic before, you can kind of see, at least through the binoculars or the telescope, that for sure that's going to be something that organizations have to reconcile.
Devin, it's always really good talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing some great insights with me. Right, Devin, now for a bit of fun. Get to know you a little bit more. Are you ready?
Sure, as ready as I can ever be.
Absolutely. Okay, first question. What was your first job?
My first job was a fascinating job working at a trap and skeet shooting range. And I literally loaded the clay targets on the mechanical arm that would launch them out for people to shoot a shotgun over the back of my head and hit them. It was before the days of automated, where a robot could actually swing that out and you didn't have to put a person in a cement box to do it. It's a terrible job, but great first job experience. So
I was going to say, that's a pretty cool first job. Would you rather be able to speak any language in the world or speak to animals?
Any language in the world, and I'll say that primarily because I already talk to animals. So I think the languages would probably suit me a little bit better, be more helpful.
It sounds like another conversation for another day, possibly.
Yeah, maybe over a few more drinks.
What's the most inspirational book you've ever read and why?
Oh, the most inspirational book? I'll actually go all the way back, Where the Wild Things Are. When I was a kid, that book fascinated me and instilled kind of the concept of adventure and imagination and just having fun. Across many novels and many more in-depth and substantive pieces of work, I still can remember that one from the first day and all the way through. And it's usually a gift I give all of my friends and family when they have their first kid, so that they can read that to them over and over again. So
that's a great book. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Trust yourself. That's always the best advice, and don't be afraid to fail when you trust yourself. That's borne me well over many a time where the tendency maybe to second guess or worry too much or all of those things. And sometimes you just have to trust yourself, and you might be wrong, but you'll learn from being wrong as much as you'll learn from being right, sometimes more.
Yeah, it's kind of like going with your gut, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could teleport anywhere in the world, where would you go?
I would go to Tasmania, and I would go to Freycinet, the park there, and just enjoy a little bit of nature now that I've been cooped up like the rest of us for quite some time. So, yeah, beautiful place. If you haven't been there, don't go, because I don't want it to be spoiled. But stay away. That's my special spot. So, yeah.
So voice call or video call?
Depends on time of day. I would say video call during the bulk of the day, but probably early in the morning. Voice call while I'm drinking my coffee, and in the evening while I'm drinking my wine, beer, or cocktail, or all three. Yeah, maybe still a video call, because those ones can be kind of fun. So.
Well, my next question might correlate with that one. So dawn or dusk?
Oh boy, I like the dusk because that's a good time to have a nice drink and kind of let go of some of the stress, and then maybe get back to it later.
And a number of people have said something very similar, actually. So there's a common theme rolling through this series.
all of the CEOs and folks that deal with technology just tend to have this really bad habit of drinking in the evening, apparently. So.
Do you believe in fate?
I believe in timing and kismet, which are, I guess, kind of aligned with fate. So.
What's worse, ironing or gardening?
Ooh. Probably gardening. And only because I don't mind doing the gardening, but I'm not consistent at it. And so usually what happens is a little bit of it, and then it gets really bad because I've created something that now I have to maintain outside, which that doesn't work out so well. So lots of dead tomato plants. So.
Yeah, I'm there with you on that one. Your most watched movie ever?
Wow, most watched movie ever. Let's see, Star Wars is on that list, but not as much recently because there's so many new versions of it. Not the original. I would put probably Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino on there. That's an easy watch for me, much to my wife's annoyance, who will ask, "Haven't you seen this movie like 1,000 times?" Yes, but I enjoy that one. So
it's a good watch. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh boy, let's see. In 3 words, passionate, committed, low-key, hyphenated word.
Like it. If you were given an all-expenses paid trip to the north of England, would you take it?
I would, for sure. I think it's beautiful country.
Great. Well, come and visit me. I'll buy you a beer.
Oh, that'd be great. We can do that at dusk or dawn. I'll break my coffee rule.
Who is your greatest inspiration?
Oh boy, greatest inspiration. That's a really tough one. I find inspiration in a lot of the traditional public figures. I also found a lot of inspiration in both of my parents, who really came from very humble beginnings and used education to elevate themselves, and really taught me a lot of those concepts like trust yourself, and it's really up to you, and what you put yourself into really helps determine what you can become, right? I'm not a believer that you can tell everybody that they can be anything that they want to be, because that's not always the case, but I am a believer that it is up to you how far you can go with what you've got, and they really instilled that in me from the earliest days, including when I was a troublesome teenager. So.
Type, touch, or speak?
Speak.
Elvis or the Beatles?
Beatles.
Say g'day mate in an Australian accent.
G'day mate.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. One of the
I
best, I
lived there for
reckon.
a while, so I've got maybe an edge, although all my Australian friends would give me grief for that one. So
If you could go back in time to any date, what date would you go back to and why?
let's see, I would go back to 1992 on my birthday because I was in Melbourne and it was quite a tremendous festivities for my birthday that year. So it's good. It's good fun.
Which new technology will transform the future?
Well, I'm going to have to say video collaboration technology using AI. I think AI as part of the communication mix will really transform how we can solve some of the hardest problems in there. Understanding and communicating across language barriers, cultural barriers, being able to use that AI to assist people to, whether it's in a sales conversation, make sure they do the basics, whether it's in a support conversation, helping them make sure that they follow the 5 things that usually resolve the problem, whether it's a security context, identifying the things quickly, automatically on the fly that can help prevent problems downstream for that individual or for their employer in that environment.
That is a really great answer. And my final question is, what's your greatest achievement ever?
Greatest achievement ever? It's got to be, the easy, obvious one is managing to convince my wife to marry me. I think that was a good one, and that one has stood the test of time and allowed me to be as successful as I am. So.
Devin, it's been really great talking to you today. Thank you for taking time out, and I really appreciate everything you've told us today. I wish you all the very best for 2021.
Thank you. Likewise, best for 2021, and I will definitely take you up on visiting and having that beer or 2 or 3.